Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us for our first webinar from Cenveo Publisher Services, How the 2014 United States Postal Service Rate Increases Will Affect Publishers. My name is Marianne Kalahana. I'm the Director of Marketing at Cenveo Publisher Services, and I will be moderating today's program. Today's agenda includes a brief introduction to our webinar sponsor, Cenveo Publisher Services, our panelists, background information on the proposed rate increases, an overview of how these increases will impact publishers, and finally, we'll save plenty of time to take questions from you. You may submit questions at any time during the webinar by typing in the questions box in the GoToWebinar dialog box. These slides will be made available on our website, and this webinar is also being recorded, and you'll receive a link to that recording in a separate email tomorrow. I invite you to share that recording with your colleagues, and feel free to let me know if you are experiencing any technical difficulties or audio issues via the chat dialog box. Finally, I do want to point out that this is not a standard class presentation. We are not covering that topic, but if you have questions related to standard class, you can absolutely feel free to submit them, and we'll make sure to follow up individually with you. So just a quick background about us. Cenveo Publisher Services provides solutions and services to journal, book, educational, media, and trade publishers. We deliver a full range of technology, content, and delivery solutions that escalate revenue and streamline workflows while ensuring editorial integrity. On the print and digital delivery side, we provide services such as print on demand, packaging, reprints and e-prints, distribution and fulfillment, apps, digital delivery of any content format a publisher would require, like XML, print-ready PDFs. And on the content side, some examples of our services include DTD development, content development, copy editing and proofreading, production management, streamlined workflows, composition, conversion, and more. But we're probably best known for our industry-setting turnaround times, and that can be as fast as 24 hours from manuscript to composed page. So I am thrilled to have here with me today two of my colleagues who have spent their careers working in the publishing industry. Frank Lynn is Vice President of Postal Affairs and Distribution here at Cenveo. He serves on our corporate team as the primary liaison with the United States Postal Service. Frank's role also provides the opportunity to direct our logistics movement of both domestic and international mail. Kristina Freeman is the Director of Business Development at Cenveo. She is fluent in magazine production and printing. And also very interesting to note is that prior to joining Cenveo, she was a Cenveo customer herself. And with that, she brings a really interesting perspective to our conversation today. And my name is Marianne. I started my career in the STM publishing space and have held a number of roles for both book and journal publishers. And today I take my publishing background and ensure that Cenveo's breadth of services are communicated to our prospects and customers in a meaningful way. So now I'd like to turn things over to Frank, who will give us an overview of the proposed price increases. He's going to define some terms listed on this slide that might not be clear. Frank, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. What I'd like to talk, at least on this first slide here, is a little bit about the rate increase, what it's going to cover, how the process moves in terms of getting rates approved and how they'll be implemented, and then mention a couple aspects of this case that are uh, interesting. At a high level, for folks who are budgeting, the post office in late September, we requested 2 rate increases from the Postal Regulatory Commission. One of which is their annual their annual consumer price index increase, and that's approximately 1.6%. They've been authorized to capture this increase annually in late January based on 2006 regulatory action by Congress. And the Regulatory Commission in Washington tabulates, and it's the scorekeepers, as you might call them, for the increases of from pricing on a month-to-month basis. And the post office will just file for that increase at a certain point. And then the PRC rules on that request. In a lot of cases, it's a rubber stamp. A lot of the details have been already resolved, the scorekeeping, the rate calculation. So that being the case, the Board of Governors should get an answer from the Regulatory Commission. We're suspecting in early to mid-December on the CPI. And as the screen says, it's approximately 1.6%. Now, as a result of the recession and the continued sluggish effects on the economy, the post office has been adversely affected, and quite frankly, they're running out of cash on hand. They've expended their ability to borrow from the Treasury, and their cash on hands are dwindling, so they are seeking a one-time exigent rate increase of approximately 4.3%. And the post office will have to wait for a ruling from the Regulatory Commission. They have a process in Washington where mailers and industry organizations can submit and file briefs to influence the Regulatory Commission as to whether they're going to get the approval to move forward with this exigent rate increase. It was important to note that one of the reasons for the post office's difficult financial situation is that they're hindered by congressional requirements that they pre-fund healthcare and retirement benefits to an extent that no other federal agency has to do this sort of thing. The post office, as they struggle through this recession, has missed the last 2 annual payments. And that contributes to these ominous headlines that says the post office loses $5, $6 billion, $10 billion, that they're $12 billion in arrears because the post office hasn't paid the last 2 payments. And of course, they've missed, it's due to 30th September each year, so they've missed the last one also. If you look at the post office operations strictly on a operational standpoint, they've actually turned the corner and made a very slight profit in the last quarter. So one would say, why were they attempting this exigent rate increase? And it's essentially because they're looking for postal reform for Congress. And Congress is been deadlocked. They can't agree between the House and the Senate as to where they want to take this, or modify the business model under which the post office operates. So for these reasons, and with cash dwindling, the post office had to file this exigent increase. In the publishing industry, this has caused a lot of ire, as you would expect, because it's difficult enough right now just trying to make a living and publish and try to get advertising in our publications. And yet the post office seeks this. So I believe that they were forced into a corner to do this. And unless we can get some movement in Washington from Congress, some form of increase is going to be put through on a one-time basis. At a high level, we note to you what the single piece postage would be for a single stamp. That stamp you get into the post office and you buy a strip of them. that's a little less expensive if you use the meter machine. And the post office is trying to incent folks to move towards an electronic postage environment. There was also the beginning of pricing strategies related to the new flat sorters called FSS that the post office has installed in the country. There's about 100 of them, and the goal there is to process flats in the same sort of sequential manner that they handle letters, and significantly reduce the carrier time in the office during sorting and prepping in the morning. So this is unique in that the post office is now going to require mailers and mail providers to prepare mail for these machines in a certain kind of format. Now, the machines themselves are only scheduled to handle approximately a quarter or so of the total mail stream of flats. So this is a little more difficult for mailers now, because you have to prepare mail in two ways. One way to the areas where the machines are sorting, and the other way, which is they sort now for the normal flat sorters they have in the buildings. This is why we make a note here that the bundle and container prep is required in FSS zones, and the post office really has not released an indicator as to what kind of additional discounts will be given to mail providers to compensate them for the additional work. There have been some modifications or elimination of pallet prep charges if you take mail directly to one of these machines for processing. But for the normal publisher, unless you're in a heavily sequenced or a co-mail environment, at least for this rate case, I don't see FSS affecting you financially significantly. And the last item that's important is that this is the beginning of requirement for full service intelligent mail. And in the past, it was an option. As the post office moves towards implementing this type of barcoding to be able to capture data. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about what the advantages are of this full service intelligent mail, and some of the additional costs that you might encounter if you don't adopt this. Okay, next slide.
Hey Frank, could you just give a real quick explanation of what a flat is?
Well, a flat can be considered anything that's greater than 6 inches in width and greater than, I believe, 6 inches in height. Generally has a weight that exceeds, an ounce or so. A flat would be a publication, could be a catalog. Sizes below that amount, as long as they're not greater than a quarter of an inch, they're defined as a letter, and those and needs tabs on them. They would have to be processed on a different piece of equipment at the post office.
Thank you.
So for the average periodical customer, we tried to have an example here on this slide just to show you that the rate increase when you add the CPI, which is the mandated consumer price index portion, and the exogen together, you're going to have an increase that falls within a range of 5.8 to 6.2%. I would speculate that most periodical customers are going to see an increase under 6%, but just a hair under. Also, there's a couple classifications in periodicals, which are one's called outside county, where almost all periodicals mailers can be classified as, or inside county. And inside county was a classification that was created back in the 1700s for local newspapers. And we add this to the slide just to let you know that the increase is pretty much uniform across most of the rate cells in the classification, and all publications will pretty much be affected by the rate increase in a rather uniform fashion. Okay, next slide. So I believe to our audience here, I think the biggest impact of the rate increase, other than the fact that you're going to have a rate increase, is understanding the value of the Intelligent Mail Barcode program, and to understand what the value of it would be for you, and determine how you could help your organizations by adopting it. The first point here I think is rather salient. Of course, the obvious benefit of the IMB is you want to maintain your automation discounts, because we've done some studies, and when combined with the combined rate increase, we're predicting about 3 to 4%, at least from the publications we studied, additional lost incentives if you were not to adopt it. So you take the 6 and you add the 3 to 4, and the total increase that you could see in January could be as much as 8 to 10%. And that could be crippling to a publication, of course, as everybody knows, because you spend probably 30% of your budget on distribution and postage. So that could be a big dollar value to you, cost. The post office is also tying this barcode as a prerequisite to qualify for participating in future mail programs. For example, the post office is now beta testing a program where you can have one mailing permit as a company permit anywhere, mail anywhere in the country. And for those who also mail a standard class, you have to have permits all over the country where you mail to collect revenue and pay postage. That would be waived. There's a benefit by using the IMB for getting address changes in a timely fashion, electronically, without paying a fee. And right now, you might be paying as much as 31 cents for an address change when you get it electronically, and that cost would go away under using the Intelligent Mail Barcode, and also registering in the address change notice program. The IMB also gives you some opportunities to get access to Postal Service scans as the pieces are running across their processing equipment. And in doing so, you can determine if your mail is being delivered in a timely manner, or a manner that's similar to what their service standards are. And it allows you also to, if you want to say track your mail movements, to time the deliveries with multi-channel marketing. You might have direct mail efforts tied with the receipt of your periodicals mail. Your advertisers in your publications might be tying the advertisements in these publications to other efforts that they're tying into. So there is value to having visibility for your mail piece. And in my opinion, the requirements to qualify for this barcode may not be as ominous as you might think it to be. All of our plants are certified, and we can create this barcode. We can support our customers in modifying their incoming data to give the post office what it needs to make the uniqueness for these barcodes. So at the very least, if you walk away from this presentation today, I think you should sit down and think about what is your strategy for the Intelligent Mail Barcode. The first is how to qualify to protect your discount you're earning now, and second, how to create a strategy to leverage the value of the visibility for yourself and also for your advertisers and your readers. Okay, next slide.
Thanks for that background, Frank. So we've had this high-level overview of these proposed increases and the IMB program. Christy, I'd like to invite you now to walk us through, what this really means, because it impacts everyone who's on this webinar. It's going to impact magazines, journals, catalogs, and of course the printers. Christy?
Sure. And you hit the nail on the head, Marianne. Really, at the end of the day, we want to understand how this is going to impact our business. How much is it going to cost me, bottom line? And we'll get into that a little bit later with some examples. What can I do, or how can I ensure that I'm compliant? The answer to that is to make sure that you're designing your covers to allow for the proper placement of the barcodes, and to make sure that what does appear in there is being properly read by the post office machines. We can advise on that for you as well. There's also information on the post office site to help you with that. And along those lines too, for compliance, we'll show you later on as well in this webinar what we do internally to help you with that. But also your customer service account managers are prepared to provide you with resources to get the information that you need. We can help to an extent, but there's also resources that are out there that our account teams are prepared to help all of our customers with. So, and at least point you in the right direction. You have to look at the strategy. The strategy is that you have to look at is how to, you need to review how you're mailing. Consider all of the rule changes for content. That might mean your add edit ratio. That can affect what the rate is that you're getting as well. It's complicated, and we can help you with this. And like I said, we'll get into that a little bit more as we go on. But you also want to make sure that your printer is on top of this. We at Cenveo, we have all of our software updates. We have our procedural changes in place. We know what we have to do in that regard. From a publisher standpoint, as it says here on the slide, what you're doing now is the first step: education on the postal registration, on getting postal registration, understanding the IMB benefits. You might also be asking, what is my printer going to do for me? That's something that outside of Cenveo I can't speak to, but I know that when I was a customer, my first line of defense was to go to my customer service rep and just say, what does all of this mean, and how can you help me? And they were very helpful in that regard. And then, if you're a small publisher, if you're a large publisher, it all ends up being the same at the end of the day. And it all comes down to compliant and taking advantage of the discounts that are out there. As Frank mentioned, for me, I know for me personally, not having to pay for address changes is huge. When you're paying 30, 40 cents per address change, that adds up. So we'll talk a little bit about keeping your list clean as well as we go on. And making sure that your circulation department, many of you may say, circulation department, I'm the ad sales, I'm the editor, I'm the circulation department, I don't have a circulation department. So you're going to be asking yourself, what as a staff do we have to do? And that's hopefully what the information you're getting from here will at least point you in that direction. So if we could move on to what strategies you can use, which, Marianne, that would be the next slide. I would like to ask Frank to cover a couple of these in terms of co-mailing and additional options, some of which he's already touched on, but could maybe reiterate.
Well, yeah, a lot of folks come to us, ask us, what can we do? Cenveo has been offering co-mail options for clients for a few years now, and we would talk to each customer and see if they would qualify for a co-mailing opportunity. For those who aren't familiar with co-mailing, we have a piece of equipment that's probably the size of a football field or so, and we tried to merge 30 individual mail pieces together in the same mail stream, and in doing so, you earn greater discounts from the post office. And then we take the mail from this aggregated stream, which could be as much as perhaps 3 million copies, in some cases 4, and we truck it around the country to as many as 200 to 225 different postal facilities. So, and drop shipping is a process where if you have those densities existing in your mail piece right now, instead of entering the mail at the printing facility, we truck it to where the post office will process it. Generally, drop shipping is a tool or a practice for publications that are very regional in nature, within a radius maybe 300 miles or so from where you're creating the publications. Co-mailing is national in scope. So that's one option. The other options, which we continually say to clients, are stay abreast of the rule changes with the post office as they relate to content. The post office has loosened a lot of the regulations for including matter in a periodical's publication and paying for periodical rates for that content. For those folks who've been in the business a while, they're called the supplement rules. You can have a secondary piece in the publication, and it can be 100% advertising, as long as it doesn't look like a catalog, like it doesn't call itself to be a catalog. It can't be gotten separately through a subscription to some sort of firm. It doesn't have a price on it. There are several characteristics will disqualify, but they're much looser than they were in the past. That the post office is also becoming more lenient with unique configuration of pages that include pieces of string or film or things of this nature. And even product samples are being looked at with a new eye by the post office and permitting them to mail at periodicals rates as long as they pass certain qualifications so that they don't become a hazard in the mail stream. For example, you can't add a packet of let's say flour or some sort of powder, because there's all sorts of restrictions in the marketplace now about it could be a biological agent or something like that. Or you can't put a packet of a liquid or a gel unless it's thoroughly tested so it doesn't burst when the pieces are processed. So then we have the standard thing we always say. I mean, how do you clean your mail list? How clean is your list? I mean, everybody invests a tremendous amount of money in print and paper and intellectual effort to create this publication, but it is not valuable unless it's getting to the right person at the right time with the right address. So let's do what we have to do to address the accuracy and the efficiency of the mail list before we begin. And that's another strategy folks use. And in doing so, I think if you talk to your account manager and your salesperson, we can help you develop some strategies to at least check these items off to make sure you're doing the best process you can to offset these seemingly inevitable increases from the post office and try to create more revenue to help yourself, to minimize the pain, so to speak.
And to add on to that, Frank, regarding the offset of increases with additional revenue, some other things to consider if you're not already doing it is to actually monetize your digital editions, if that's an option for you, for your organization, whether it be through sponsorships or additional ad sales, and even on your website as well. We know that everyone's trying to do that, but now more than ever might be a time to come up with a strategy to monetize your digital and online products that could help offset whatever increase you would have in postage. Other things like, this might not be an option for many association clients because you want to protect your list, but there's some really good, respectable list brokers out there. I'm sure everyone's approached to buy their names to be resold. I'm not saying that's an option for everybody, but there could be additional revenue in that for you as well. And then, everyone needs to leverage the brand of their publication. Everyone's magazine, journal, catalog has a brand, and there's ways to leverage that with award programs. They are huge moneymakers. Small events, things like that whatever additional expense you're going to incur, which we will get into in the next slide with an example, but that might be these are just little ways to help you offset your revenue with offset your expense with additional revenue. So, and your sales team can help you with that as well. So on that note, maybe we can show examples at this point of, and Frank, maybe you can go into, does it matter if it's a magazine or journal, and how will that affect things differently?
Okay. So we picked 4 examples just to give everybody a taste of how the rate increase could affect them. Since we're both a journal and a publication printer, we in all fairness did 2 of each. Let's talk about the first one, which is journal, and a modest size, 12,000 copies. And here's one that weighs almost a pound, has 22% advertising. The first thing I want to bring to your attention is the origin postage, about $6,500. And the increase will increase your expenditures about $400 approximately to $69.53. One of the questions I receive from quite a few publishers will, what will happen if I don't adopt the full service IMB? So we're looking at probably an increase of about 4%. And ironically, if I had a generalization today, you'll see a loss of discount equal to about 3 to 4% of your postage based on what we were studying. So in this case, the 6,900 actually becomes 7,157 if they didn't adopt the full service IMB. And then lastly, this publication will have qualified for co-mail. In fact, all 4 do. And if you were to co-mail, we're estimating an average postage decrease of approximately 35% when one co-mails, and that's what you pay in postage. And the actual fees for the co-mail process can vary based on your contract with us. So if you can co-mail, I recommend you strongly consider it. There's probably not enough time today to really go in depth about this, but contact your account manager. We can set up an opportunity to speak with you one-on-one and explain some of the benefits of these. The second one's a nonprofit journal, and generally some of these journals have 0 advertising. It's all editorial, as you would expect from the post office standpoint, or virtually none. And here's a case too. It indicated about a 3 to 4% increase if one doesn't adopt the full service IMB. And again, this gives you a perspective of how much the postage costs would have been if they co-mail. That's a mistype there. It can't be $85.50 for co-mail. It should have been much less than that. On the magazines, the 2 magazines, one is 11 and one is 39,000. You know, the advertising content in the larger count one is rather low. The 11,000 copy one's moderate at 28%, and that's understandable due to the economic client. Pieces both weigh about a half a pound, and it pretty much goes without saying. You can see how the increase grows, and of course you don't want to put yourself in a position by not adopting the IMB because you're just taking an increase of which you have no recourse to offset. Again, co-mailing would be a significant value to you, and something that you should consider.
So, on that note, Frank, you had on the co-mailing, and I agree, there's not really time for it to go into it with this webinar, but a question I had posed earlier was, what is Cenveo doing in this regard? You know, what is our process? What is our value chain? How do we ensure or reiterate to our customers that every dollar that they're spending with us is worth it, or every dollar you spend with your printer should be worth it as it pertains to the mailing process?
Okay, well, I think we had a slide that represents this. The best way I like to describe to clients, both prospective and our existing clients, is I see Cenveo adds value to every dollar you spend by going through a process, and we can start from the beginning. When you give us your mailing list, one of the first things we do is we can match it against the post office's mover files in Memphis. And the post office keeps records of folks who move within 48 months, and they make changes when a person leaves a forwarding address to go to, and if not, we can pull it out, we give it back to you and say this person no longer lives here. In the periodical space, not everybody wants that. I mean, some folks are business to business, and in some cases, the academia, they don't file move notices, of course, because it's just residences. But that address matching process is there for anybody who wants to buy it. And in a rather routine way, we get multiple files from different organizations, and they ask us to tie all these files together and take out duplicates. And in some cases, when you get data files that have flaws in them, we take out bad addresses, zip codes missing, as bad spellings of states and things of this nature. So we actually do a lot of this hygiene, because what's the sense of putting an imperfect address on something that's never going to get where it has to go? After we're finished with doing the cleansing and the matching and all these processes, we do what's called a pre-sort process. We match the address file against all the carriers in the nation and the scope of what they're going to do. It's called CASing, Coding Accuracy Sequencing Service. And we actually add a +4, or the last 4 digits, to your zip code. So when you have an address, if you have the +4 at the end of your address, that means that the address is recognized by the post office. If you can't add a +4 to an address, that should be a warning flag to the mail owner, the folks on this call, because that means the address in some way hasn't been standardized to meet what the post office says the address should read as. So we pre-sort this list, and we take the list and we group the addresses to make postal bundles, and then we assign those bundles to go on pallets, and essentially we're making the mail in a format and a sequence that's consistent with the way the post office is going to handle them. This is exactly what I meant when you have this new FSS environment that's coming into play. For the average periodical mailer, unless you're co-mailing, you're not going to see a cost differential right now, at least as far as we know. However, Cenveo has to make your mail in 2 ways. We have to make the 25% in the mail for the FSS machines, and the rest of the mail has to be processed for different kinds of machines. There's a bit of complexity there. One of the changes we made within the last year or so is that we no longer make sacks for your mail unless you really specify you want sacks made, because sacks were demonstrated to drive up processing costs. So we made a choice, and we just eliminated those sacks for our environment, and most of our customers saw a rate decrease of about 8 to 10% when we eliminated sacks. Now that's an average. Some folks might not have seen something as demonstrable as that because you didn't have that many sacks to begin with. But by their nature, periodicals, publications generally created a lot of sacks, and the post office could never cover the cost of the revenue that they would capture from the sacks. So they gave mailers an option not to make them at all, and that's something we did about a year or so ago. So if your publication qualifies, we'll make a choice, and in discussion with the client, of course, and we might co-mail your publication, or we might drop ship it based on its unique characteristics. And co-mailing itself adds another step to the process, so you have to ensure there's consistency with the timing of when you're making the publications and when the pool begins, because you really don't want to have copies sitting around for several days waiting for their slot in the pool, because everybody has in-home dates and they have timing needs for delivery of their mail. And then as you go down towards the end of the chain, you have the intelligent mail. I mean, what do our clients and what do they want to learn from intelligent mail? Do they just want to be compliant with postal rules? That's fine. I think we can get you there without a whole lot of effort. Do you want this kind of scanning information? Do you want this free ACS? You have to step back and think, how many address changes do I field a month? Is it worth all that extra effort? And when you're done here, we have mail strategies. We service a host of different clients around the country. Some are weekly publications that have really and strict in-home expectations. In some cases, we do journals that are 4 times a year, and a journal that's published 4 times a year might have different requirements for how they want their mail processed or when they want them delivered. And then you have more frequent publications. Every 2 weeks, you have monthly publications. No one strategy fits everybody. And then the last step is we distribute. We can tender the mail to the post office locally, or we can truck it all over the country and give you some visibility as to where your mail is at and to how it's being processed. So we like to describe this as the value chain for mail. I mean, you folks continue to spend more money each year on postal, and you might want to say to yourself that, you know, what am I getting for my dollar? And that's, we try to give you the best spend as you can by providing services that augment the processing of raw data into addressed mail pieces. So that's what we were referring to when Christy was talking.
Thanks. Thanks, Frank, and thanks, Christy. You know, something I'm thinking about while you're speaking is that another thing for everyone on this webinar to recognize, and I think everyone does, but with the increase in digital, which of course is important and relevant, I think people are starting to appreciate print a little bit more than they have in the past few years, simply because we're being overwhelmed on the digital front. So there still really is a lot of value in that printed piece. And I love the strategies you recommend for offsetting and gearing up for the proposed increases. It's really a holistic strategy to your organization. You know, this is a perfect time of year to kind of sort of take a step back and make the time to look at your organization, your print dollars in a strategic way. So thanks for pointing those things out. We're going to open the floor to questions. I'd like to remind everyone to please submit during via the GoToWebinar dialog box. I recognize I'm having a small technical glitch when I have to enlarge a box to read all your questions, so just bear with me if my screen kind of goes out of preview mode. I'll jump it right back here. So Frank, one of the first questions for you is, I haven't done anything with IMB yet. Is it too late? And can you go through some of the specifics of what one would need to do?
Well, no, it's not too late. There's 3 major requirements to qualify for the intelligent mail. I think the first thing that one has to do is decide what they want to get out of intelligent mail. Do they want it to be just compliant with the postal regulations, or do they want to take advantage of the potential for free address changes and the possibility of tracking? And then once you decide what you want to do, it's probably going to raise a lot more questions. For example, the next question that would come to your mind is, well, what would it take to get free address changes and tracking? Well, generally the mail owners would go to the internet and they would pull this information about their publications. They'd want to pull their address changes. The tracking services, we can purchase them using a third-party company, and there'd be a surcharge so that there's not a whole lot of heavy lifting there. I think that the second major thing of the 3 things to do is the publisher or the mail owner has to be identified by the post office as a customer. And there's 2 big terms One's called, and they're acronyms because that's, of course, you're dealing with the post office. One is called a CRID, which is a customer registration ID, which is how you register your organization. And then a MID, a mailer's ID. So if you were a publisher who had, let's say, 10 publications, your CRID would be the same for all 10 publications, but your MID, your mailer's ID, could be unique to each publication, or it can be unique just to the company. And the reason why is that the post office determines the uniqueness of each mail piece when you spray that barcode based on the MID that's appearing on the mail piece. So if you want to have some discrete data about how your piece is moving and your address change, you might want to get your own MID for each publication. That's a choice you have to make. And the last requirement is we have to figure out a way that we create this uniqueness for each mail piece, because that the post office has said a window of 45 days where each mail piece has to maintain its uniqueness. And that's created by the series of digits and the codes that go within that barcode. Think of it like a license plate of a car. You have to have a unique license plate for each mail piece, and it has to last at least 45 days. So it's not too late. In fact, there's a lot of folks in the same boat right now, and the post office is going to an extreme effort to offer webinars. You can go on their website and you can listen to webinars that explain the process. There's audio. There's a significant number of documents. I think if you just throw yourself into it and decide and learn a little bit about the process, make a choice as to what your publication or your organization's strategy is going to be, I think we'll get you where you have to be. You have until July 26th. So we haven't run out of time yet. It's only November.
Okay. And could you quickly define CRID again?
CRID stands for Customer Registration ID.
Thank you.
Just like a Social Security number for your publication.
Okay. And the Postal One account, when does that have to be ready?
Well, it all depends. I mean, if one really doesn't want to get that into getting these additional services from the post office, we as a mail provider can acquire these two numbers on behalf of the publisher. However, I think it's a process that everybody should be registering with the post office themselves, for the simple reason you're going to have to do it sooner or later, so why not get the paint over now? And it's really not that tough. It might take you 15 minutes, and it gives you the opportunity, if you pay for your postage electronically, to get all your copies of your receipts electronically. You can track the movement of how your money's moving. You can track your mail electronically. I think you're going to be there anyway within a few years. So, of course, no one's required to register, but if you want some of the additional benefits and services, that's something I think you should do. And that's a straightforward process also that the post office defines on their website.
Okay. And how long does it take to get an IMB?
Well, the MID or CRID, you might get them within a day, 1 to 2 days.
Okay. You talked about co-mailing. What impact might that have on schedules?
Well, I don't have a generic answer for that. The reason why I don't know where the publication is at right now, and I'll explain to you what I mean. Our co-mailing services are offered in the Midwest, and as a whole, if you were to take all your mail pieces that are nationally distributed, I think you'll see an equal or better and a much more stable and predictable delivery of all the pieces around the country. Okay, so where you're going to pick up and get better service is probably west of the Rockies and maybe in some spots of the South. You might see a slight degradation of service on some of the East Coast points, and that's primarily because the Cadmus and Cenveo locations are East Coast centric. And then the Midwest is going to be pretty much a wash. At a high level, I believe that once the mail leaves the unaddressed copies leave our facility, we should be seeing a completed mailing within 13 to 15 days after it leaves our hands, complete. For those clients who have chosen to do this, they pretty much adjusted their schedule at the start. And once you make the first issue change, the co-mail process becomes rather routine. In the early days of co-mail, I can't say it was as seamless, and sometimes we had some snafus occasionally, but the process is very predictable right now. And with the IMB, you can actually track your mail as it's processed or where it's being scanned to see how the co-mail process is performing for you. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, that's great. And is there a minimum quantity to co-mail?
Technically, the minimum quantity is going to be about 10,000. However, anything between 5 and 10 is entertained based on availability of space in the co-mail pools.
Can back to IMB, can nonprofits track mail through IMB?
Yes, they can.
Okay. Someone asked if you could explain a little bit about FSS and how that's changing.
Well, FSS stands for Flat Sequencing System, and in essence, the post office is trying to sort flats the same way they sorted letters when they're trying to give the flats to the carrier in the morning, already put in a sequence where that carrier walks their route. And the goal was that they could save probably 1 to 2 hours of carrier office time each day by not having to rehandle all their flats mail. I don't think they captured as much savings as they anticipated, but they still think it's sufficient that they're capturing an ROI that allows them to continue moving on. They surely can't back out of this process because they invested several $billion in the program. It's been speculated about 25%, maybe a little bit more, of the mailing addresses for flats are being serviced by FSS equipment. There are about 100 pieces of equipment in the country, and as you would think, they're being located in areas where there's the highest density of flats. In a lot of cases, it's higher income areas, more affluent folks. I don't have the schematic memorized, but I would venture to say probably 2/3 of them are in the eastern half of the country. You need a special kind of preparation for FSS because they're trying to continually improve the process to eliminate the handlings and the bundle breaking and and also the physical debundling of the copies as they go into the equipment. It's a 2-pass piece of equipment, and it's all integrated in. The machine's about the size of a football field. And if you really wanted to learn about FSS, there's a link on the Postal website. And if you go on to YouTube, they have some videos about FSS as to how it operates also. The post office generally has about 80% of their costs are labor, which are employee labor. And that contrasts with maybe 55 to 65 in a printing facility, a printing company. So the post office's only way to cut their costs is to eliminate labor and handlings, and this is their answer. They want to eliminate a lot of the rehandling of flats mail. So in addition to this, as everyone knows, they're cutting down the number of physical processing centers in their network by as much as 50% within the next year. So they're trying to downsize and be more efficient for the declining mail volumes, and now they're going to try to be more efficient as to how they handle the flats. This is probably a longer answer than one to hear, but that's a complete one nevertheless.
That's helpful, and that's a really great point. The Post Office YouTube channel has a lot of very useful and informative videos that show their equipment and how it works and how the whole production of how they process mail works. That would be helpful to everyone here. I think we have time for one last question, and I will say again, I see that we have a number of questions we didn't get to. Please know that we'll be following up with each individual who submitted a question. Frank, as the final question, can you talk about STID in 4 minutes?
Okay, a STID stands for Service Type Identifier, and it's a component of the barcode. Essentially, it's telling the post office what kind of services you want to buy. And to use the analogy of my teenagers, it's no different than going to McDonald's and saying, I want a number 1 meal, number 2 meal, or number 3 meal. I mean, you're just telling the post office what kind of services you want to buy. There's a chart, and it's based on mail class and the kinds of services you want to buy from the post office. Do you want a periodicals, automation mailing with ACS changes? Yes or no? Or do you want and you have a different number from someone who wants no address changes and no tracking? So a STID is just, you're telling the post office what kind of services you want to buy. We can guide clients on these kinds of decisions, and they can sign off on them. We can give you the chart if that's important to you, and you can study up on this yourselves, but that's essentially what a STID is.
Okay. And you know what, Frank, I will get that chart from you and put it up on our blog. That'll be useful for everyone here. Well, we've come up to the end of our hour, and I just want to thank everybody so much for taking time today. I know everyone has extremely busy schedules, but this is an important topic, and we want to be sure that our commitment to each of you is evident, and we'll continue our conversation individually. Please feel free to contact me if you have any additional questions. I encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn to keep apprised of our blog posts, events, and upcoming webinars. This is the first of the Cenveo Publisher Services Wednesday webinar series. We have a full schedule coming up, and I'll be sharing that with everyone on our website. So thanks again for your time today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And this concludes our program. Thanks, Kristy and Frank.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.